Hi there, I'm Scott Lowe with ActualTech Media, and thank you for joining us for this Spotlight Series video. I'm joined today by Josh Thorngren, who is the VP of Growth for StackPulse. Josh, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Scott. Very happy to be here.
So, Josh, I have to ask, what would you say StackPulse is doing here?
Yeah, so, we all know this right now. Before we got on this, you and I talked about the 50 different competing video conferencing services there are. The world's digital. The way that everyone connects is online. And that's happened not just in what we would typically consider online services, your streaming video, your Netflixes of the world, your email providers, but pretty much every industry, banking, healthcare, even government and infrastructure relies on online digital services. StackPulse is a platform that helps keep those services up and running and reliable so that users can trust them and users are going to continue to engage with them. If you think about pretty much any service you use, it goes down sometimes. But if your bank's app goes down, you stop trusting your bank. That's the age we live in now. It's not their core business, but that digital service they provide is still the way that customers are going to evaluate and judge them. So StackPulse, we're about keeping that world more reliable, helping the companies deliver those services so that consumers can trust them.
So how are you helping them deliver services? I mean, are you doing some kind of helping them with development? Are you helping them respond when there's an outage? What does StackPulse bring into the equation?
Yeah, so we actually start when there's an alert and go all the way through until an outage or another incident is resolved. StackPulse allows you to do a few different things. At its core, we have two components to the platform. One is how do you and your team communicate to understand the impact of an alert? Is this something that needs to be followed up on? Is this something that could cause customer downtime? Is this something that could leave sensitive data exposed? We help teams communicate by centralizing data from all of their production systems, their network monitoring, their application monitoring, their infrastructure monitoring, and bringing that to the people who are responding automatically, and then going out and getting additional context without a human needing to go do manual investigation. We then also let teams actually create code-based playbooks to fix these problems. And what I mean by that is when something goes down, teams usually have documented processes. If X, then Y. If we have high CPU and users can't log in because the server's not responding, spin up a new server, restart it. But that's written out somewhere. That's documented. And that's not really the way anything else in the development pipeline works. So why does it work that way when you're in production with a customer-facing service? It shouldn't. StackPulse allows teams to build these playbooks as code, deploy them, and then automate how they execute in response to different events in your environment. So it's both about bringing the context together to help teams understand what's happening and empowering teams with a set of tools to take action faster than they would be able to prior to having StackPulse.
So at the front end of this, when you talk about an incident or an alert, I should say, are you correlating and you're correlating and aggregating alerts and logs, I guess, probably from across lots of different systems to help provide people with more context, because more context helps them do a root cause analysis faster. And when things are a common potential, when you're seeing common alerts, you're helping them automate the response to help speed up the overall resolution to that incident.
Spot on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you have an incident that's not common, by providing people that context, you're helping them, well, contextualize it, because that's the very definition of context, so that they know where to start looking rather than just, hey, something went wrong, have fun.
Exactly. And, if you look at how a lot of teams handle on-call work, that work of responding to an alert, determining whether or not it's an incident, whether there's impact, and resolving it, there's this notion of how do you take your first human and then escalate it to your second human and escalate it to your third human based on how common something is. The more context, the more specialized knowledge that's needed, the more humans get involved in that loop. That's a really inefficient way to do it. And if something's going wrong at 3 a.m., that takes a toll on the humans involved as well. And so with StackPulse, by bringing the context in up front, a lot of times we're able to remove additional humans from being looped in. Someone who may not have the knowledge to go get the right next piece of information, that's okay. They don't have to call someone who understands the networking setup better. StackPulse collected that and delivered it to them and said, here's the underlying cause. Here's a playbook to fix it. Click here to execute that.
How are you gaining that insight into the customer organization and application environment to a sufficient degree that you're able to pinpoint? I'm not saying pinpoint with 100% accuracy, obviously, but with here's where the problem is.
Yeah, so one of the things that I think differentiates the StackPulse approach with more traditional tools for incident response and incident management is StackPulse is really based around how do we understand the signals in your environment. So there's been a lot of work of monitoring vendors over the past 5 years to do more AI and ML, and let's look for patterns and analyze different aspects of what our system tells you to reduce the noise and to help people take action based on these alerts. But ultimately, just looking at the technical monitoring isn't sufficient. You have to understand the business application context. Is this a critical service? Is this customer facing? You have to understand the changes in the environment. Were there recent deployments? Have those deployments touched the service that's impacted? You have to look in the past. Have we seen similar alerts? And if so, did they lead to incidents that we had to resolve? You have to pull all those pieces together.
So you're not just dropping into an environment and saying, okay, here's the deal. You're basically dropping into an environment, learning that environment, how it works today, determining what it's supposed to look like when things are working well. And over time, you're watching for changes that could impact that environment. And then as you're seeing those changes, learning how the impact happens so you can help people identify, here's what may have happened when something goes wrong.
For the most part, yes. I think the point, that I'd put a little more nuance on is StackPulse is a operational platform. So teams use StackPulse to manage the incidents they have. StackPulse syncs to Zoom and to Slack, so they communicate, and that communication is captured in StackPulse. StackPulse collects those events from your deployment system, from your monitoring system, like a Datadog or a New Relic, and pulls those in, giving you this holistic picture of when I respond to an alert, when there's an outage, what were my operations? What was my technical bill of health? What was happening in my environment? That use is what allows us to then make better recommendations over time on what's happening. It's, and I want to distinguish that between, hey, StackPulse, deploy it, run it for 30 days, don't do anything, and then it gives you insights. Right. That's not what we do. And again, that's very limiting, because if you don't have that human element of what does your response look like today? How do you tag different systems, according to, was this detected by a customer? Who did this impact? If you don't have all of that, you're missing the full picture. And so we start with use StackPulse to manage your incidents. And then over time, StackPulse learns enough to help you prevent those as well.
It's nice to hear you say that there's human involvement. Too often, I think we hear about, like to your point before about AI and ML, it's sort of, those words have become semi-meaningless in a lot of ways, because there still has to be someone determining what was right and what was wrong. A machine can't do that on its own without someone saying, this is how we fixed it.
Yeah, exactly. And you've seen this trend in DevOps, and I'm a guy. 11 years ago, I was a development operations manager before they kind of put those together. So I've been watching what the evolution in DevOps has been for a long time. You've seen this trend of how do we start to make everything code-based and declarative? So instead of a human logic chain, how does a human express that logic as code and rely on that? And you've seen that with how people build testing pipelines. You've seen that with how people deploy their infrastructure. You have someone code out, here is what this test should run. Here's success, here's failure. Here's what our infrastructure should look like. Here's how to scale it up and down. StackPulse lets you do the same with these sort of response playbooks. You code out what should happen, what the logic should be, and then watch it execute. But you still need the human to define what that thing is. If you don't have that, you're really going to be at a loss. And I think that's why what we hear from a lot of customers is, I tried something with AI Ops because it promised that I could do insert big claim, A, B, and C.
Right.
It's not that it can't do those. It's that the level of trust in the outputs just isn't there. It gets it wrong, and it doesn't really absolve the human of needing to be involved. And so if a human wants to be involved, then let the human make something declarative, but still just as automated.
Yeah, and that declarative piece from the human is a signal to the AI that something is good here. Like, this is what we should have done. Yeah. I can see where that could be really useful down the line. That's interesting.
Yeah, exactly. If you're able to execute sort of declarative playbooks that have room for human interaction but are still machine-based, over time, that can plug back into an AI ops model that has a lot of benefit. That's not what we're doing, but you get better trained systems as an output of using StackPulse that can plug back into that world.
So when you look at your customer base, what is like, I mean, you don't have to name names, but what's something that you look at and go, this was really cool, and this is what we helped them do, or what something we helped them avoid, or, like a huge long downtime, or a security incident, or like, what's something you're really proud of?
Yeah. So, I think the example I'd give is we have a customer who they deliver a security solution to their end customers. And so obviously, it's an inline security solution, so it has to be running and it has to be, reliable. It can't go down because it takes down the service it supports, and it can't perform in unexpected ways because it's security. You have to maintain that firm bounds. Now, this customer, their infrastructure throws up alerts sometimes, and it's just part of the nature of their service. As their customers' usage scales, they'll get peaks and spikes. 95% of those are fine. 5% of those aren't and need to be investigated further. And investigating, it's not a lot of time. We asked, hey, how long does this process take you today? And they're like, well, just to investigate one of these high database load alerts, it takes someone about 5 minutes. Okay, that seems fine. And then we asked, well, how often does this happen?
There's the question right there.
Exactly.
16,000 times a day.
Well, I mean, it was starting to get up there. What they calculated is this was about 400 hours of work for one small on-call team a year. Now, you think about 400 hours a year, that's not a ton just in and of itself. But when I think about one of the things that we're at StackPulse most proud of, it's they wrote a StackPulse playbook that did all the investigation they had to do, presented the high-level findings via a Slack message, and had a button that said, remediate this or ignore this. And they just click on it, and all of a sudden that 400 hours a year became less than 10 minutes, just yes, no, yes, no. They have information to make the decision. They have the ability to click somewhere and make a decision at their fingertips. And I think about the human aspect a lot, because it'd be all well and good for me to say, hey, that saved 400 hours of downtime. And we could say something like that, but it saved this small team all of those hours of doing the same investigative work over and over, hopefully not making an error, distraction from their main day-to-day job. It saves all of
That's
that.
the
And
key.
that's one of those small wins. Exactly. It's
Yeah.
one of those small but really powerful things that, as someone who used to be on that side of a house, I get really excited about how we're able to transform, the lives of an individual on-call engineer, and then what that looks like at scale too.
There were two things you said, I think, that are really important. I mean, there's more that was important, but two things that I want to call out. One is nothing takes 5 minutes. Even if it takes 5 minutes, it's not 5 minutes, because the context switch that has to happen in your head. I mean, I get interrupted, and I'm interrupt driven a lot, but that's incredibly inefficient. So anything that takes 5 minutes really took 15 or 20. And the other piece of that is the potential to introduce error. When you do the same thing over and over, you're going to make a mistake at some point. If you can push a button where it's automated, it's right, the potential for error, and honestly, the potential for introducing even further downtime, is all but eliminated. And so those two things are, I think, incredibly valuable, and you should scream them from the rooftops.
And it's funny, Scott. That's what we hear from our customers too. It's those pieces being able to help save the teams from the context switching, and to know that you're not introducing additional risk. And be it because you've got the declarative process in place that's running as code, or be it because you now have guardrails so no one's logging into machines in production directly, StackPulse playbooks are executing, whatever it looks like, reducing the risk during that process has been something we hear time and time again is one of the main benefits of using StackPulse.
Josh, this was a really great conversation. I really appreciate you joining us today for this video and helping us learn more about what StackPulse is bringing to the market. This is incredible.
No, thanks, Scott. Really enjoyed the conversation. It's always great to talk with someone where I give the 40,000 foot kind of on message marketing overview, and you're like, I get this. Let me ask a bunch of real detailed questions. So very much enjoyed it. Thank you.
Excellent. And if people want to learn more about StackPulse, they can visit your website at stackpulse.com. The link is currently on your screen. And we also thank our audience for watching this Spotlight video. If you'd like to watch any more Spotlight videos or any more ActualTech Media content, visit ActualTech Media's YouTube channel at youtube.com/ActualTech Media. Thank you for watching.